Okay, we've got people filing into the background. I know we've got a lot to cover, so I want to make sure we leave our presenters enough time to cover all the exciting things they want to say. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining our live webcast. We're very happy to welcome our channel partner members, including those loyal members of Seagate Insider, to today's event. We hope you find the content really valuable and that we exceed your expectations as always. Hey, the goal of today's session, everybody, is to introduce Seagate's newest storage solution addressing the growing network-attached storage market. And to help us today are two guest speakers. So let me get them up on the screen so you can get familiar with who's going to be presenting today. To help you today are two folks. First up, we're going to hear from Jason Minowan, Seagate's Product Marketing Manager for the Iron Wolf product line. And then we're going to hear from Patrick Deshare, Marketing Manager from Synology America. So great to have a special guest with us today to roll out this brand new product. And after we highlight Seagate Insider for Partners program, we're going to wrap things up with a bit of Q&A that you guys are going to be sending in using chat or the Q&A box. But all of that and much more, before I hand things off to Jason and Patrick, my name is Joshua Walty, Seagate's Global Partner Lead, and I'll be your host for today's session. So a few reminders for those of you who may be new to our sessions here. To preserve the sound quality, all participants are on mute today, but we do want to hear from you. Use that chat box, like I said, to message us for assistance. If you have any issues with WebEx, obviously you can send your questions in there. We'll also be answering questions throughout the presentation behind the scenes. We know Synology's brought some folks to help us do some question monitoring. So don't be shy, send them in as they come to you. And we'll do the bulk of the Q&A will be at the end. Finally, all attendees on today's session will receive a follow-up communication with directions for how to access the presentation and the video recording. All right, that's enough for me. I want to get on with the show. Jason, let me go ahead and get things teed up for you. I want to make sure that we can hear you and that we can also see your slides. So let me know when you've got the ball.
Yep, I do have that ball. And just a heads up for everybody here that's been a part of the session, we do plan to give away some Iron Wolf 110 SSD drives and looking at a Synology box too as well. So let me go ahead and make sure to jump into this so that way we're all on the same page. And hopefully we see this.
Yep, sure can.
Great. So as Josh mentioned, I am the product marketing manager for the Iron Wolf product line, which includes both the HDD and SSDs. So today we're going to speak to the Iron Wolf SSD, in which it provides you the performance that you need in a NAS environment. And of course, today we're partnered with Synology, so Patrick will be speaking here shortly thereafter me. And I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into the next slide. So like our hard drive line, we looked at Iron Wolf SSD and found ways to make sure it's truly a purpose-built drive for NAS. So the drive is built to be tough, ready, and scalable. And when we mean tough, we wanted to make sure we have an enterprise-class drive that has high endurance and reliability, which is built with Dura-Write technology. So it is also covered by the 5-year limited warranty and a 2-year data recovery plan. And due to its nature of being just a solid-state drive, we know that it helps minimize noise and vibration in a NAS box. Of course, you're still going to hear the fans in a NAS box, but having an SSD and not having a spinning disk will actually help minimize the noise. And a lot of creative pros find that very helpful in their environment, especially on a desktop, so that way it's very quiet when they're working away. So looking at the ready aspect of the Iron Wolf SSD, and due to its enterprise-like feature, it's set to be built for a 24/7, always-on, always accessible application in this environment in a NAS box. So it has power loss data protection, and in the event of power interruptions, and it helps actually help with Iron Wolf Health Management. It will also be available soon for this box. So we have the power loss data protection, the Iron Wolf Health for easy system monitoring, which is soon to be coming. Iron Wolf Health is a feature that we do have on our HDD line that we'd like to carry over to the Iron Wolf SSD, and it provides the intervention, prevention, and recovery options through the NAS operating system like Synology's DSM, which is DiskStation Manager. The drive is scalable, meaning that it has high read and write speeds for NAS, and it's great for caching caching or all flash array solutions, and we have a wide range of capacities that will meet any budget for your customer's needs. So just looking at the IronWolf SSD overview here, the IronWolf SSD can accelerate internal NAS operations, and it's easy to integrate into NAS of today. And currently about 20% of NAS boxes use SSDs, and it's expected to increase to 30%. And partial reason is just because of the standard 2.5 form that they have to provide with SATA. But also, it's just the offering that SSDs have to offer, such as the enterprise grade endurance with the 1 drive write per day and 7,000 terabytes written, and the peace of mind IronWolf health and data recovery has to offer. So just taking a look at more into the specifics of IronWolf 110, it's ideal for NAS caching, all flash array. And it's great for media enthusiasts, for media enthusiasts at home that like to stream tons of media content, creative professionals, and small medium business NAS users. So the sequential read is up to 560 and 535 with a random IOP of 90K and write of 20K. And as you can see on the bottom chart across the board, we're looking at 1 drive write per day and terabytes written. It varies on the capacity, but it ranges from 438 to 7,000. So being 240 gigs being 438 and 3840 gigs is up to 7,000 terabytes written. So now let's take a look at caching for NAS. So there are 3 scenarios. So you can fill the NAS with high capacity hard drives like the IronWolf or IronWolf Pro hard drives. And in return, you get the max capacity point at an affordable price. But of course, you just don't want to. You won't get the performance of an SSD. If we decided to get to do a hybrid of both HDD and SSD, which you see in the middle column, you can still maximize capacity, but also have a balance alongside with performance. This in return can lower total cost of ownership that meets the best of both worlds. And a lot of customers tend to do this, especially creative pros that have empty bays and want to just simply upgrade their NAS in terms of performance. So they usually have like a 4-bay NAS box, and then they have it with 2 HDDs, and they'll insert SSDs in there just to help increase the performance. So of course, if your customer wants pure performance, they can go all SSDs, and that's in the 3rd column. But in return, they have a smaller capacity, higher TCO, but you'll be able to maximize that 10 gigabit network or above, that 10 gigabit or above network performance if their network is actually set up for it. So how does IronWolf 110 SSD compare against general client SSDs out there? Well, first, we're looking at high endurance, and with the 1 terabyte SSD, we're looking at 1750 terabytes written, and the competition is looking at 1200. And we have IronWolf Health, and this is soon to come. It's a first to market on our HDD line, and we plan to do the same for the SSD. So alongside with this, we have the data recovery service that provides an in-house data recovery that covers data corruption, viruses, user error, flood, and fire damage. And last option that we have here is the power loss data protection, where that provides that extra peace of mind for your customers. So looking at creative professionals and taking a look at those 4 advantages that we have, creative pros, they need storage to be very fast, so they need that performance. And if they have the network to support it, they can take their NAS even further with IronWolf SSDs. So creative pros, if not by themselves, are in a high workload environment in which they have a team to collaborate with when it comes to editing files. And creative pros do love that high capacity drives. They've always asked for HDDs just because of the amount of data that they use when it comes to creating 4K content. But mixed with SSDs, this can certainly help with performance through SSD caching. So having best of both worlds, like I mentioned in the earlier slide, having high capacity and SSDs will help with what they're trying to accomplish. So here's where the advantages of Iron Wolf SSD come into play. Since Creator Pros have a heavy workload environment, we made sure the Iron Wolf drive has high endurance for this environment. Creator Pros also typically have a limited IT budget or knowledge of storage. So with the peace of mind with 5-year limited warranty and 2-year data recovery, this will help provide them support when it's needed. And as mentioned earlier, Iron Wolf Health can help monitor their drive through the NAS, which will be a set it, forget it solution, and they will be notified when the time calls. So you could set that up through DiskStation Manager, Synology's operating system. That way it's tested every other day, every week, or during times when downtime when there's less traffic hitting that NAS. You could have it set to do this test so that way they get that peace of mind. And then with the power loss data protection, they will also know that their data is safe and is NAS approved by top vendors like Synology for the best possible experience. So we worked with Synology. It went through some rigorous testing, and we made sure that this SSD can meet the needs for what Synology's customers are looking for, as well as yours. Next up is for small to medium-sized businesses that use NAS. So it's very similar to the Creator Pro environment. SSDs may be needed for a very collaborative environment here, and can be used for small virtualization deployments or to use to run multiple applications on the NAS box. Synology will be speaking more later about their business NAS here after me, but their solutions do provide great opportunities, which will involve lowering TCO, license-free or no monthly cost solutions for your customers. So in a NAS environment with SSDs that are very productive, we'll likely use a NAS for backing up, file sharing, and the small virtualization storage use cases. So we highly recommend using a high endurance drive like Iron Wolf SSD, or even teaming up with an HDD for these small businesses to get that high capacity. So medium-sized businesses, also very similar to Creator Pros, have limited IT resources. So we have the 5-year limited warranty and the 2-year data recovery for their peace of mind. And then, of course, the power loss data protection and the partner approved from Synology. And it being approved, it'll be a lot easier for our NAS partners to work with your customers or with you when the time does call. And since the drive has been approved, likely you will get that peace of mind and that reliability for this NAS to run for a good while. So looking at the SSD portfolio, we provide a wide range from Barracuda SSD for home to Nitro SSDs. Our Barracuda line is built more for home, and our Nitro Enterprise line is built for enterprise data centers. And majority of you may be wondering what is the difference between the 110 and the Nitro SSD. And the main difference between them is that we worked very closely with Synology as well as other NAS partners to get the best possible experience. And by doing that, we have tweaked the firmware specifically on the 110 to make sure that it does meet like a multi-user environment, being able to handle that workload. And we also have the drive health monitoring, which is coming soon, which is specific to Iron Wolf 110. And then you also have the 2 years included with the Iron Wolf 110 drive that the Creator Pro or small medium business may need. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you guys to Patrick. Patrick is the next one up that's going to be speaking more about the Synology product line. So Josh, would you like me to pass the ball to Patrick?
I'll go ahead and do it on the back end. Jason, you can take a look at, we had a couple questions come in.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to take a look at it. You touched a little bit, Jason, on power loss data protection. I just wanted to confirm that's a part of the drive, and maybe you could explain a little bit more about what that is before we jump into the Synology side of the discussion.
Yeah, the power loss data protection it's something that our that client drives normally don't have. When it comes to the other general SSDs, this is something that is definitely needed. It's an enterprise feature. So if there is an event of like power loss, you will actually, instead of just losing all that data, just like a general SSD has, at least for this one, you have that protection of that power loss. So in case if that does happen, you won't be panicking, going crazy like, oh, I lost all my data on my SSD while I was doing an operation. At least you have the power loss data protection with the IronWolf SSD drives.
Got it. I know we have more on Seagate.com. I just wanted to highlight that as it's a question that came in, and you did mention it. I see we have Patrick's slides are up. Patrick, can we hear your voice, or do you need me to unmute you? Probably if he's muted, he needs to be unmuted. There he is.
Hi there, everybody. This is Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound great.
Great, okay. Can you see my slides?
Yep, you bet.
All right, great. Well, then I'll just dive in a little bit. So my name is Patrick Descher. As Joshua mentioned, I'm the marketing manager at Synology America. So Jason just gave you a quick update on some of the specifications of their new SSD line for NAS devices. And my primary goal for my presentation that's coming up next would be able to answer the big question of in what kind of situations would you want to consider installing these SSDs in a NAS, since we all know that you could also have HDDs installed. First, though, if you aren't very familiar with Synology, I'll just do a quick introduction. We are a maker of network-attached storage devices. We have products that range from small devices for homes or home offices, all the way up to devices that can scale upwards and accommodate 180 hard drives. So that means that if you need 1 terabyte or 1,000 terabytes of data storage, there's an option for you. We also have products that can accommodate different kinds of network interfaces, such as 10 gigabit. And also this connects into what I just mentioned, but we have products that allow you to start small and then scale up later. So if you have a customer or in your own environment, if you just need to start out with 2 drives or 6 drives and then scale up and add capacity later on as your budget increases, that's possible with us. Now, the thing that makes Synology pretty special is the fact that in addition to providing the hardware, we also design and develop all of our own software that runs on the NAS. All Synology NAS models come with a browser-based operating system that's called Synology Disk Station Manager, or DSM for short. This allows you to set up the NAS, monitor all of the services, configure storage or backup settings, and then also run a pretty wide range of other applications that can be handy in the network. Now, because we bundle the hardware and software together, I like to say that we provide a unified solution. Now, what I mean by that is that we provide the hardware and software together, and that means that you can reduce license costs. Whereas some other solutions out there on the market might force you to purchase hardware from one vendor and then the operating system or software from another vendor. With Synology, most of the software, especially the operating system, basic stuff, it comes bundled along with the hardware, so that will lower the total cost of ownership. Another nice thing is that also simplifies some of the technical support process. I know I've definitely been in situations in the past where I got bounced around between a couple different vendors who wanted me to check with the other vendor. With Synology, that doesn't really happen because you have the hardware and software technical support all in one place. Now, I want to get into answering the big question, which is, in what situations would you want to consider installing SSDs in a Synology NAS box? I'm going to go over 2 scenarios. The first scenario is what I refer to here as a private cloud, or some people might call it a private cloud file server. In this situation, you have a NAS, which serves as the centralized hub for storing company data. That data, it might be documents, HR files, accounting information, or Jason also spoke about this a little bit. There are a lot of creative professional companies out there, whether it's photographers, videographers, multimedia broadcasting agencies. companies like this all have a large amount of design files like PSD, JPEG, or other Adobe files. As everybody's familiar, the NAS connects to the network, and then that is how your PCs or workstations will access the data that's stored on the Synology NAS. And then also that gives you the ability to have multiple people or multiple devices access the NAS over the network and collaborate with each other. I'm still always surprised at the number of people who email large files back and forth or want to drop a file on a USB drive. Having a private cloud set up like this can really reduce a lot of the headaches when you're trying to work with an internal design team or with an internal marketing team. Now, one of the problems that you might run into in a situation like that is working with your available bandwidth and file transfer performance. If we think about this situation where we have a company where people are sharing a lot of files with each other and they're using the NAS as a centralized data storage and collaboration hub, you might run into bandwidth issues. For example, if you imagine that you have 20 workstations that are all connecting to the NAS via a single 1 gigabit Ethernet connection, that means that overall those 20 workstations would have about 125 megabytes per second worth of bandwidth to share amongst themselves. If there's a situation where all 20 of those users are connecting to the NAS, uploading, downloading different files, that means that you would take that 125 megabytes per second divided by 20 users, and then each user would only have about 6 megabytes per second of bandwidth to use when uploading and downloading files. So if you imagine that you have, let's say, a brochure that you're working on with your marketing team that equals 300 megabytes, then that might take, if you have to transfer it at 6 megabytes per second, that could take 52 seconds to transfer from the NAS to your computer. And in this day and age, when we're counting results by mere seconds, then people can get a little bit impatient. So the way that we can solve this, one way would be to upgrade the network to support 10 gigabit Ethernet. And as I'm sure most of you are familiar with, 10 gigabit Ethernet provides 10 times the bandwidth that a single gigabit Ethernet connection would provide, which roughly equals about 1,250 megabytes per second. So if we do that, then we apply the same situation where we have 20 users connecting to the NAS and uploading files back and forth. That means that a lot of them will have a bit more bandwidth to use when transferring files. And if they run into that same situation where they have a large multimedia file to get from the NAS, that file transfer would only take 5 seconds in this situation and would go a lot more speedy. So the next consideration that you might run into in a situation like this, though, is now that you have that extra bandwidth from upgrading your network to 10 gigabit connection, you would probably want to check the storage that is in that underlying system. I know that with the Seagate IronWolf HDDs, they probably have a higher read-write speed than this, but for simplicity's sake, let's just say that one HDD has about 100 megabyte per second maximum read and write performance. This is just affected by different things in the HDD, like the speed at which it can spin or firmware. I won't get into all of that today. Now, when we're HDDs in a RAID system, there will be some benefits that you'll see in terms of performance, because multiple drives can be spinning and reading and writing data at the same time. A really simple example of this would be if you have 4 drives in a RAID 5 configuration, you would theoretically have about 300 megabytes per second worth of bandwidth. Now, that would help the situation a little bit, but that wouldn't really get us anywhere close to saturating the 1200 megabytes per second bandwidth that we just established using 10 gigabit connections. So in this situation, you can consider installing SSDs, and as an example, one of these newer SSDs I saw on the spec sheet that Jason provided has about 560 megabytes per second. I think those were read speeds. Sorry, there's a mistake there on my slides. So if you have 2, 3, 4 SSDs configured in RAID 5, you would also see some of the benefits in terms of file transfer performance of spreading the load across multiple SSDs. So now this kind of brings me to the next section, which would be talking about the actual various options you have when installing SSDs in a NAS and then taking advantage of their greater throughput. The first option that I'm going to talk about here would be SSD caching. So in this situation, Jason mentioned this a little bit earlier. You could, for example, if you had a 6-bay NAS here, you could install HDDs in 4 of the drive bays. This gets you your high-capacity storage that you'll use for just storing most of your files that your team is using. And then if you'd like to install SSD cache, one option you have would be to install 2 SSDs in 2 of the empty drive bays. This will enhance the performance when you're dealing with situations where you're accessing, reading, and writing hot data. And by hot data, in this situation, what I mean is the files that were most recently accessed, either written or read from the NAS. To give you a real-world example of how SSD caching works on a Synology NAS, if you imagine that there's a company party and the HR department uploads photos from the company Christmas party to the NAS, and then they send a link to the whole office saying they can check out the photos on the NAS, then when the first employee goes and opens the photos, they will be read from the HDDs themselves. But from there, they'll be transferred to the SSD cache that we have set up. That way, when the second, third, or fourth employee logs into the NAS and they want to access the same data, those files will be read directly from the SSDs, which will give them a little bit better latency and then also file transfer speeds. And another little benefit too is then that will reduce the number of read and write tasks that you're putting on the HDDs, which in turn could also help with extending the lifespan of those HDDs. So SSD caching is good in situations like the one I just mentioned, where you have a small amount of very frequently accessed files. Now, another situation, though, might be when you have a lot of different files, a large amount of hot data. And in this case, I would recommend that you consider an all-flash NAS. One option you would have would be to take a desktop NAS like you see here that was originally designed to accommodate 3.5-inch drives, and you could also install that with all SSDs and then use that as your primary storage pool. We also have some products that are specifically designed to accommodate 2.5-inch SSD drives only in our all-flash FS series. Situations like this that I've seen in real life are related to some of the use cases that Jason mentioned a little bit earlier. There are some broadcast or multimedia stations that need very high performance data storage where they're hosting video files or footage or photos or graphic design files, and they need those different workstations to be able to collaborate without worrying about latency or limited bandwidth. Another situation that you might want to consider for using all-flash NAS would be these days NAS makers like Synology also have a lot of applications that go beyond just data storage. For example, we have our own mail serving application that you can install and run on a NAS. I was reviewing one customer case recently that was a newspaper where they're using Synology for their internal file server, but they're also using it as their mail server. And in situations where you're using a NAS as a mail server, you're going to be dealing with lots of very small random read-write operations. And in that case, using SSDs would help alleviate some of the latency or random write performance that you have in NAS. Another good use case, though, would be another point that I was going to touch on, which would be using a NAS as the storage node in a virtual machine environment. In an environment like this, you have a VM host, and this might be an ESXi host running VMware or vSphere, and you're running different services in those virtual machines. Now, to give yourself a little bit more flexibility when you're planning your compute resources versus your storage resources, you could consider connecting that virtual machine host to the network and then using a Synology NAS as the data store via NFS or iSCSI. Synology is certified to work with VMware, Microsoft Hyper-V, and Citrix XenServer. And we also offer some more advanced features like VAI capability to offload and enhance some performance. So in situations like this, the VM data is stored on the NAS, and then it is only accessed over the network by the compute host. In a situation like this, depending on the number of VMs that you're running, you could consider using SSD cache with a couple HDDs installed, but for most cases in an actual production environment, since you're going to be dealing with a really large database, I would recommend going with an all SSD NAS like the one that you see here. Now, I don't have a lot of time to get into the nitty-gritty or walk you through all the setup steps today, but over here I am including links to a couple in-depth video tutorials that we have hosted on YouTube where you could check out a couple demonstrations where we get into the actual setup process for how to utilize some of those features that I just went over. Also, another thing would be if you have any technical questions or would like to contact us in the future, there's a link here to get over to our product inquiry page where you could speak with one of our technical support experts. And with that, that's my presentation, so I think I could hand the ball back over to Joshua.
Yeah, that's great. Patrick, can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you loud and clear.
Okay, just checking. WebEx has been very interesting on the back end this morning, so I'm glad to still be with you. Great presentation. We've had a few questions come in. Go ahead and take a look at a few of those. I know we've had people asking all sorts of pretty technical questions. Great topic to touch on mixing SSDs with HDDs. We know that's something that has come up quite a bit when we're at trade shows, no doubt for you guys as well. So take a look at some of those. I'm going to go ahead and switch the slides very quickly so we can get to our formal Q&A at the end here. And just want to throw up on the screen here, call it my quick commercial, if you will. Wanted to jump in and make a quick plug for Seagate Insider for Partners. As a channel reseller, integrator, consultant, or even a business owner, membership in the program is free. Gives you access to all the latest tools, sales aids, training, and support materials from Seagate. I know Jason's been working fast and furious behind the scenes. We're building out all sorts of tools and configurators and things that are going to be added value, but you got to sign up to be able to access. And also, if you're not a member and received today's invitation from a colleague, we encourage you to take a few minutes and sign up after this webinar. How to do that looks something like this. Very quick, very easy. And we also send out a monthly newsletter. So there's all sorts of great sort of NAS tips and tricks that we allow people to access as well. So as I move the slides through, Patrick, we'll kind of go in reverse order here. If you've had a chance to look at some of those questions, maybe you could take a few, and then we'll move to Jason and see if there's any questions he would like to address as well in the live session.
Sure, I could dive right into a couple questions. Yeah, there was one question about using 1 gigabit Ethernet and 10 gigabit Ethernet, and are there any options for link aggregation? The answer is yes. Depending on the Synology NAS model, we have some options that come with only one gigabit Ethernet port, but that also goes up to some of our models come with 4 ports. And in that case, you can set up link aggregation to bond those 4 ports together so that you would have better bandwidth, since that would increase your bandwidth from something like 100 megabytes per second to 400 megabytes per second. Or you can also set it up to support failover so that if one of those Ethernet cables that you have plugged in is a dud, then you could have some automatic failover to a different Ethernet port on the NAS. And that's true of both the gigabit ports and then also for the 10 gig ports. So some Synology NAS models come with 10 gig built in. Some of them come with a PCIe slot for installing either like a 10, I think maybe off the top of my head, a 10, 20, or 40 gigabit cards. And then from there, too, you could also bond those ports together so that you could have 2 of these 10 gig ports working at the same time to increase bandwidth or for failover. I saw there's another question about Docker. Is Docker an option? And the answer, again, is yes. There is a specific Docker package that runs in Synology's DSM operating system. With Synology, we have something it's called Package Center, which allows you to browse, download, and install applications on the Synology NAS to expand the functionality beyond just storage. And one of those applications is Docker. So once you have the Docker app installed on Synology, then you can use it as a host to run those Docker containers if you don't want to go into a full-blown virtual machine environment. We also do have our own Type 2 virtual machine hypervisor. It's called Virtual Machine Manager, and that runs directly on a Synology NAS box, which I think is useful for also some lightweight virtualization situations where maybe you just need to run 1 or 2 Windows machines on your file server or a NAS that you already have on your in your office. And I see there's also questions too about WordPress and Plex. Those are also options that you could install from the Synology Package Center. I know that there are a lot of companies out there use WordPress on the NAS box. I would recommend considering using the NAS box as kind of like a internal testing device for your website. You can make some changes internally on WordPress running on the Synology NAS before then migrating any of those changes to your actual production server. And let me check if there's anything else here.
Yeah, I jumped in here real quick, Patrick. Somebody did bring up the ability to take advantage of VMware encryption, either with the drive or the enclosure itself. Didn't know if you had a position on that.
Oh, I'll have to look into that. Is it possible for me to get these questions emailed to me so that I could follow up with them afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. We know they're coming in fast and furious. We know that there was another one here. I want to try to get to it. Somebody was wondering sort of PCIe versus SSD, pros and cons. It's sort of more of a drive or a form factor question.
Yeah, I see there's one here about recommending the PCIe slot or using an SSD. And I think, so these days, some of our NAS devices, they will accommodate the M.2 form factor SSDs for caching. That's pretty cool because you can either install those M.2 SSDs via a PCIe adapter card, or some of our devices have a built-in slot where you can pop them in pretty easily. It takes about a couple minutes. The really nice thing about that is it doesn't require you to sacrifice any of those main drive bays that you could otherwise be loading up with some huge IronWolf HDDs. Now, I guess on the flip side, the one situation where I might recommend an SSD would be basically it comes to capacity. I'm pretty sure that these days SSDs still come in, some regular form factor SSDs come in larger capacities. And that means, well, we have a tool actually in Synology at DSM that would allow you to estimate based on the current storage performance or based on current read-write operations on the NAS. It will be able to give you some recommendations on the capacity that you need. One situation I can think of off the top of my head is if you are using Synology as a VMware storage node, you might end up with more hot data than could be accommodated by one of those M.2 SSDs. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep, sure does. I think another question popped out real quick before we head on over to Jason. Let me take a quick look here. I know Howard was actually asking about 40 gigabit Ethernet. Is that something you guys are looking at? And what's your crystal ball for a timeline for the implementation of it?
I'll need to, right now I'm opening up a spec table. I might be able to answer that in a couple minutes, or I might have to come back to that one also a little bit later.
Got it. No gotcha questions here, Patrick. We're just, you have sparked quite a dialogue, lots of questions coming in, which is awesome. Maybe we could pivot a little bit to Jason. Jason, I know that we've received some questions on the back end. A couple that I saw were related to sort of, positioning IronWolf SSD versus Nitro SSD, which I know we've had some press about as well. And just kind of like from a high level, how would you describe sort of the difference between the two in terms of application and how do you approach those two?
Yes, so as you guys saw, the specs are exactly the same. And the big difference is that we do plan to have the IronWolf Health Management to be on IronWolf SSD. So IronWolf Health is that drive monitoring tool that is accessible through Synology's operating system, it being DiskStation Manager. So if you're not familiar with Synology's DSM, you could go under Storage Manager, and there you will be able to do like a smart check or a test with IronWolf Health, and that's where you'll actually be able to set up a schedule with the NAS box and IronWolf SSD or even our IronWolf HDD line. Unfortunately, you're unable to do that with the Nitro products, and the Nitro products are more actually catered towards the data center, and that's how the firmware is actually more tuned towards. The IronWolf 110 SSD has been just closely worked with Synology to make sure it is optimized to meet the needs for their environment through their own testing. But besides that, we also have the 2-year data recovery, which is also included with the 110 being it more purpose-built. I would say the IronWolf Health Management is one key spec, or I would say spec, but feature that is needed for IronWolf Health to help make it to be different compared to the Nitro products. So hopefully that answers my questions, but yes, you guys are right. The specs are correct. It's just that we worked a lot more closely with the NAS partners to implement these features and make sure they are more purpose-built, tested, and have that IronWolf Health drive monitoring and help cater to those small, medium businesses, Creative Pro guys that use test boxes.
Yeah, we have a sharp audience here, Jason. You can't pull anything with them. There was one question, probably something that we could find out sending people over to Seagate.com, but somebody had asked about what kind of heat can they expect from Iron Wolf SSD to produce? Obviously not spinning media, but in terms of the landscape of SSD, how would you address that?
Actually, that's a good question. I'll probably have to defer that to Jeff. Jeff, hopefully you're able to answer on the heat question for that guy for the Iron Wolf SSD.
Yeah, sorry, I do not have those specs in front of me.
Okay, well, it looks like we'll just go ahead and just follow up. Is it okay? We'll just follow up via email and then get your answers that way on whether it's heat or any other more specific spec questions. We'll be more than happy to help answer you guys on that one.
Yeah, that's great, Jason. Thanks. Just sort of kind of wrapping things up here. If you've had a chance to take a look, is there any sort of final thoughts? Maybe, Jason, we can start with you, and then we'll ask Synology for some final thoughts from the session.
Yeah, it's awesome to speak to everybody here. With the Iron Wolf 110 SSD, this is one of the first SSDs that are purpose-built for NAS. And again, we're working hard when it comes to making sure these drives work the way they should, and I'm looking into what these NAS customers are looking for an SSD. So as this product evolves and we even make it even more polished and even better, all this feedback is awesome to hear. So working with Synology and providing a great solution with the caching capabilities, either through having it as a hybrid solution or pure performance, gives your guys' customers the best solution out there for what their needs are when it comes to network attached storage. I do want to provide a Iron Wolf 110 SSD to the teams, not to the teams, but to the attendees here. So keep an eye on that email. You might be that lucky guy that might be receiving a 960 gig Iron Wolf SSD drive and a 2-bay NAS box from Synology. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Josh.
Hey, thanks. And Jason, I know you're being very modest today. We're talking about Iron Wolf SSD, kind of a coming out party with our friends from Synology. But you also had a very interesting press release that went out today related to Iron Wolf and Iron Wolf Pro. I didn't know if you wanted to do an honorable mention in this session with respect to your new capacity.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yes, we did. We just made an announcement alongside with Exos X16, which is our enterprise line. We have launched the Iron Wolf and Iron Wolf Pro 16 terabyte NAS drive. So that's actually available. You guys could take a look on our website on Synology.com or Seagate.com, Seagate.com, and take a look at that and see all the latest and greatest of that 16 terabyte offering. So you guys can actually do a lot more. And the reason why we're continue to lead and up that capacity is just there's a lot more demand for storage, and especially for the M&E and Creative Pro guys, they just need that storage, especially when it comes to 4K. So happy to have that 16 terabyte to be launched out there for everybody to use it.
Yeah, congratulations, Jason. I want to make sure we snuck that in here. And I know we'll no doubt have a future session on that. And the people on the line today are the folks that will maximize all of those terabytes. I did want to bring Patrick up and have Patrick address any sort of open issues, anything he wanted to touch on that he may have forgotten throughout the session. So Patrick, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and see if what final thoughts you have.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting this webinar today, and thanks to the crowd. I see there are a lot more questions than I was able to answer, but I'm sure that I'll get some of those questions and emails associated with them later, and in that case, I'll definitely look into all of them, and we'll get in touch with individuals after this webinar. And like I mentioned, there are a couple cool videos that I shared in those slides. So if you'd like to have a little bit more in-depth tutorial about how to set up any of these features, you can check that out. Or you could send some more questions into our product inquiry team.
Great. I want to thank Patrick. Great job today. We know there's just, tons and tons that you could cover, and we've only have a limited amount of time. Jason, thank you so much for coming aboard and helping out with today's session. I do want to remind everybody who attended today's session that you will receive a follow-up email with a copy of the slides. as well as direction as to where you can view the recording. Jason will be pulling names out of a hat behind the scenes after the session, so if you're one of those lucky winners, we salute you. Also, my name is Joshua Walty. I want to thank everybody for attending here. Let us know what you'd like to see in future sessions. We have tons of questions that came today, so no doubt, Patrick, we're going to be knocking on your door to bring you guys on again. Great time to be focused in the NAS community. So from all of us here at Seagate and on behalf of Synology, thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you during the next session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.